Okay, Marta, I wanted to just start again by thanking you very much for agreeing to participate in the project today.
Thank you.
So we'll talk for about an hour today, and I'll start by asking you questions about your own personal history, and then we'll end with some of the work that you're doing right now.
Bueno, vamos a hablar por como una hora. Primero vamos a hablar de tu historia personal, de ahí vamos a hablar de qué te motivó a hacer el trabajo que hacías y hasta hablar como del trabajo que estás haciendo actualmente.
Can she move that piece of paper?
No importa.
Gracias.
So Martha, I know you're probably more used to talking about your organization, but I'd actually like to start the interview today talking about you and asking you some questions about your own history.
Sabemos que estás tal vez más acostumbrada de hablar de la organización, pero me gustaría empezar a hablar de tu historia personal y de cómo empezó.
So could you tell me something about your early years, your childhood, maybe what kind of family you're from? What kind of things do you remember from when you were very young?
Well, it's something so nice, and in the first place, I want to thank you, right? In the conversation we were having just a few minutes, what I was telling you is that for me, it was a big deal when Carmen Diana also had this interest.
As I said before, working with Carmen Diana.
I am going to talk about those successes and failures. I was born in a community that was, the 20 communities or regions around where I was born, there wasn't a single school. And my parents had 14 children. Of them, I am the first daughter, the oldest daughter. So we were producers of basic grains and livestock. We didn't have potable water. We didn't have electricity. We would use oil lamps for light.
What part of the country were you born in?
I was born in a community called Las Pilas in the city of Darío, in the department of Matagalpa. The whole family worked. There were 31 of us in the house. My two parents were both illiterate, and the entire family was illiterate. Later, because of climate issues, this was a very dry zone.
After that, because of climate issues, it was a very dry area.
We had to go to an area, cold and rainy area, that was called La Montaña. In La Montaña, we also had to go out for 8 hours on mule with the coffee production to be able to sell it in the department of Matagalpa. In this world that surrounded us, both men and women worked. And this is how we were able to be efficient producers, and along with some other resources that helped us. But we always went barefoot.
How old were you when you started working in the field?
How old were you when you started working in the fields with your family?
Well, at the age of 8, I was a tortilla maker, and I also went to the orchard to plant with an oxen ute. These chores that we did together as a family, our struggle to have nourishment and to have a better harvest gave us this great virtue of being efficient and at the same time to break with the traditional structures.
along with that,
What are the traditional structures in the countryside? That the girls don't work. But my father said that all of us had to work so that all of us could have.
don't work, but our Father had us all work. So that
This virtue that God gave me and that my father taught
and that my dad taught us
is the one that gave me the strength to fight from a very young age to this age. I want to turn 60 years old and then go back to farming. To turn 60 and then to go back to a finca to farm. I did not know how to read, and so I would visit a young woman who had arrived from Managua, and I would go there to read small sections of the newspaper. And I learned to read, but not to add or subtract. With the triumph of the revolution, the first thing I did was to study in adult education classes. And there I completed the 6th grade. I began secondary school, and I completed an agronomy technical certificate, having already 3 children.
And how old were you when you did that?
I started at 27. That's why I believe that humans aren't defeated when we have the desire to grow and to serve. And this allowed me to be a producer with a lot of knowledge. From a young age, to be able to work the land, to love it. I always looked for something to plant, introducing some technology for better productivity. And in our farm, we had more than 14 items that we produced. We would make the soap. We had sugarcane, and so we made the sugarcane and the sugar and the syrup. I think what you call it is rapadura, I think. It's like a square sweet. Right now I forget what it's called there. So you know what it's like to have the soap, the sweet, the syrup to flavor drinks. We also had coffee. We had 12 manzanas of coffee. We planted about 15 manzanas of basic grains. We had citruses. We had musacia, you know, the plants that are like plantains and bananas, all of that.
This was all on your family's farm?
It was a diversified farm that was just our families. There was 31 of us in the house. But we would grind 20 pounds of corn just for one meal.
grinded 21 pounds of corn at a time. I finished it when I was
At age 36. It was a 2 to 3 year degree. But, well, I'm a good producer and an efficient one, so then it was only to complement technical aspects. And this gave me the strength, and I was able to create the first movement that happened here in Nicaragua in the decade of 79, the peasant movement. I was part of that at the regional level.
Can you tell us a little bit about what
Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing right after the revolution?
The whole time, I was dedicated to strengthening peasant organizations. I started at the ATC. It was the organization that worked underground, and I started with when the Triumph. That's when we began to organize, and I belonged to the National Council of the ATC, but when we were in it, leading the North, Matagalpa and Jinotega, when...
Tell us a little bit about the ATC first.
Sure. The ATC was an underground organization that worked with the revolutionary movement of the Sandinista Front. It started because when the workers organized, their rights were being violated. They couldn't have organized here. Right here, there were only clandestine organizations. And it was the ATC was from the workers in the unions. But that's where we plugged ourselves in. When the Triumph happens, we see that the contradictions that the ATC defended the unions and the workers, but we belong to the producers. So then we began a peasant movement. The first meeting was December 14, 1979. In 1981, we created the peasant organization that is called the National Farmers and Ranchers Union. But the people from the ATC, as well as the people from UNAG, and we were all comrades in the struggle. So then I became the first provincial president of this campesino movement. They elected me. I don't know why.
As a woman.
Yeah, but this woman had won, like I said, what my father left me. He didn't leave me an inheritance. He left me strength, this vision that we also could do things. I have been strengthening that. That's something else, with better techniques. But he told me that he was teaching me so that a man or my husband would never hit me. You have to be strong. And he would say, he told me a very important slogan. He would say, the poor and the women, we cross the same path.
Poor people and women cross the same path.
But when we see them, he would say, among those who have money and those who don't, at the end, everyone ends up in the same bag. But women suffer more, he tells me. The majority of us men, we hit women. And you're going to defend yourself because you are my daughter and I adore you, and you are going to defend yourself. And that's why I swore him, I'm going to marry someone that I can dominate. I think I accomplished that. I think I accomplished that. Yeah. So that's it. My husband didn't drink or smoke. Actually, I was a smoker. That's it. Life is so deep that one... and the other thing is that I would pay a lot of attention. I don't know if it's because of my nature, but my grandfather would call me La Divinica. My grandfather said that I was a fortune teller. I was 10 years old. I would say to him, hey, if you don't take those cows out to pasture, it's going to die. That one's going to die. And it would die. And so he said that I had this way with things. It's a matter of having a way with things. But the reality is that they called me a fortune teller. So I had something this natural thing in my life. And sometimes I viewed it as if that is what I had. My nerves, they almost didn't exist. I was never afraid. And this was a dilemma. And I think also that I raised very good children that I think that many people who know them admire them. They said, where did I find the time to dedicate to my children if I was working day and night? And I told them that it's not the hours, the number of hours, but the quality. And that's important. That's important. So then I think that it's been a tough life. I've worked since I was 8 years old. I was a girl that went behind a yoke of oxen planting beans and corn. So then this has given me the strength. Where do you think that one finds her weaknesses? When one wants to make a medium-sized jump, then you find with the idiocracy of the small towns, and that's when things begin to move. So then I was regionally elected in the organization. There were some guys that said, but this woman is almost illiterate. She didn't finish secondary school. What we need are technicians. So we created an all-around technical assistance, technicians to tend the production, technicians for the procedures. So then once I said, well, I've done it all, but the women, I've left them behind. I worked until 1984 only with 27,000 men organized in the organization that I coordinated. There were also colleagues there that were on the regional directorate board, but I was the coordinator. Later, I became vice president, but I never became from president to vice president. I never went to work so that the others would give me work. I didn't need it because I'm not an office woman. I'm a woman that I operated in the countryside. So then,
were you treated differently as a woman working for this organization?
Yes, of course. When the elements of work contradict those of culture, and what are those? While we were together as a movement, the only struggle that existed was the power of the presidency. But when I saw this, there was a colleague with a lot of passion and knowledge about production, and he was elected. Well, they say he won, but the truth is that I had 2 more votes than him. But the agreement was, you go. I want to be vice president because I want to work on a topic that I haven't worked on before, and that was to work with the campesina women, because I had these 27,000 people that were our members. We had only 819 women. And these women only participated. They just participated, but they weren't active. It was like, oh, we need to have women, so they would just bring in some women. And sometimes they didn't even know why they were there. So then my struggle was to change these work roles, and we have started. Then we couldn't figure out how to work it, because they would say to me, so, but we have women here. There are women and men in the organization. Yes, but the women don't make decisions. They don't plan. And they sure aren't the presidents of the cooperative. They are the wives of the members. And when they bring them, that's when we have women. What we have are 819 women, and only 102 of them are secretaries. They always make them secretaries because women were more efficient, right? Then that's where we have to make our fight. So,
can you tell me briefly thinking back to what you were doing in the 80s, how did you get from where you were in the mid-80s to what you're doing now here at this organization?
Well, that's the circle I'm working on. I'm organizing, right? Trying to microsynthesize all of the aspects. Life is harder. You cry, you sing, and the truth is hard. When you have had to fight, and I really do consider that things are cultural because we women are the ones who have the boys. Our sons are men. We raise them. And I think that boys from age 1 to 5, that's when boys figure out the story of their lives. And that's where I say, well, we have also failed to teach because outside society gives you that role. And so when it comes from outside, you at least fight part of it within. I can't have a child and make him sweep outside because others go by and shout, "Hey, cochon." Huh? So then you have to convince this boy that it's not like that. You have to explain that to him. So I was the regional president of the National Farmers Union, and I brought in the National Council. I very respectfully directed the mid-sized producers. I think that in that period there were only 2 of us that had attracted even mid-sized producers because they recognized that we were skilled people. So while I was there, I come and plant the idea that it's necessary to organize women in collectives. And they tell me, "You're crazy. That's divisive." I tell them, but this isn't a big deal. It's so that they identify with the organization and learn to be coordinators, presidents, secretaries, and it's very important. So then they all say, well, you have to take it to the UNAG's national conference. We proposed, it was 8 women who brought this up. These women, we proposed that it was necessary for the organization's planning and statutes that of the organization that the woman should also participate in the cooperative movement. I will never forget that the paragraph that says the participation, it said participation of campesina women in UNAG. That was it. The rest of it was a document like this, but that's all it said. So we held on to that, and we tried to open a women's section. And it actually develops in the department I'm from. So then they tell me that I'm crazy. They tell me, now you screwed up. That's what a colleague tells me. Alciro Rodriguez is his name. He says, you screwed it up now. Now you're going to be with the women. But let me. If they don't want me to be there, then yeah, I'll give up, right? So then they come and they say to me, one of them says, come on, let her do that. Just leave it. But I tell him, okay, so now there's a president and I am the vice president. The vice president doesn't have a role, so I am going to make a role to work with the women. So I had my first meeting in a co-op that was called Oscar Fabricio. And I talk to the president of the co-op and I tell him I want to have a meeting with the women because we want to organize them. So we call them and we all meet at a school, and a colleague from the executive committee of the cooperative, and he tells me, you've already screwed it up, Marta. Cagar means, you've already screwed it up. You already messed up, Marta. But that's the word he used. Then he told me, first you organized us. Now you came to organize the women. And you come saying that we both have the same rights? We're talking about 1982. And he comes and he says, how is it that women have the same rights? A woman doesn't have the right to pass out drunk on the street. You know, they'll grab her tipsy, drunk with liquor. So I tell him, you don't have the right to pass out drunk on the street either. Because, look, and I just used a vulgar word, but it's because they would respect me. If you pass out and some ass comes by and rapes you, is that right? That's not right. And it's also not right for a woman to pass out on the street. The rights are different. That's other things. Rights, I told him, are that this woman, if she works equally next to you, if you work next to her, she works next to you, and you both equally work this farm that you have, I had to use techniques that they would understand. I would tell them, for example, if you died tomorrow, and this woman, your woman, does not know how to work the finca, what is she going to have to do? She's going to have to look for another man. Do you want another man to ride your horse? That's it. Would you like some other guy to ride your horse? Of course not. You know, but I was giving it a double entendre, right? You know, the woman too, right? So he said, of course not. So I would say, well, that's what we want. That you and your wife both be able to manage the finca. She can decide then if she'll enter into a relationship, but she's not going to make that decision because she's ignorant about how to manage the finca. And he'd say, yeah, you're right. So those were the methods that I started using, because in the country, you can openly have a confrontation. So after doing the visits, we selected a group of women. It was 63 women, because they still weren't, you know, they really didn't accept the concept of my work on a national level. So I go on and I create a group and I ask them if they are willing to launch a rebellion.
Willing to launch a kind of a rebel.
And that we were going to do it while we worked. So they say, yeah, we're in. So I get the 63 women who are convinced, and I go to make the proposal at the Regional Council of UNAG. And they start to tell me that I'm a woman, that, you know, you're crazy. Campesina women are not going to leave their houses. They're not going to spend 1 month away from home. So I tell them, why don't you let me do the work, see if I can convince them. Just like I became a contributor to this organization that allowed us to have a movement, a campesino and campesina movement. But campesino movements are not men's movements. They're also women's movements. So a member of the executive board stood up and said, let her do it. But this also meant to leave me without resources. No resources. So I began to visit a women's collective in Matagalpa. The director at that time, I think, was Magali Quintana and Gloria Ordoño. And I would like it if they stayed. They were women that they had another idea. It was confrontation. But the reality is that they were also fighting. They also had a struggle. I said that we had to be tactful to continue and to also have an economic force. So they contradicted me. They said I was fighting for economic reasons, but I was fighting for my sector. While it remained dependent, it would never be able to make decisions. If you don't work, you're in your house, you have 4 children, 5 children, 8 children. How are you going to make a decision? Are you going to grab the 8 children and leave? Because in everywhere else you don't have rights. There are no jointly owned deeds, no jointly owned lands. No. The woman has to grab the 8 children and leave. who would give her shelter? Nobody with 8 kids. No one's going to give her shelter. And worse still, if she's illiterate, where is she going to go? Will she head to the city? Is she going to get a house job while she has 8 kids and doesn't have anyone to leave them with? Then these are the terms that we value to know what the situation was going to be, to be able to have more decision and more participation. So they tell me, let her do it. But the ones you are going to take are workers, because campesinas, they're not going to go. I said, let me do it. So I'm talking of about 1983. And I put together a brigade that was called, the first group was called María Castil Blanco, a campesina that had been killed by the Guardia while she was pregnant. I gave it that name. And I went to visit the Women's Collective. 2 groups or 3 people like you came to visit us from Holland, from Switzerland, from Spain, from everywhere. So we asked them their collaboration, not money. We asked if they could provide some, I think there were medical brigades, if they could provide us with some necessary everyday medical products. And they offered us a few boxes. And I asked them to visit us as well. So we made a plan, logistics, with the different compañeras that were going to help us. And I asked the Women's Collective to come and give presentations to us about abuse. And so then, when we met them, since they had said one thing to me, they had said, women, you'll only be able to get workers because you'll never get campesinas to go. So I decided, I picked another goal for myself. I am going to recruit mid-sized producers. So I went and recruited 3 mid-sized producers. I mean, you're talking about these women have resources and they have a house, and I take them to the cooperative. And so we get the brigade together and we left. Along the way, we cut coffee and they paid us for this. And I would tell women that they keep and save that money. I told her to save because we would take care of food and medicine and those things. After 15 days, we took them to the city in a bus, also with the collaboration of people, and so that they could buy something that they had one day dreamed of having. Then one said that she had dreamed of having one day an electric iron, because she had always ironed with one of those that you put over the fire, made out of cast iron. So she said, I want an electric iron. Another said that she had always dreamed of having a set of eyeshadow to wear makeup. Another said that she wanted a cot, so she bought herself a cot. And we took all of this to where we were staying. We were up in the mountain. We would get wet every day. We didn't sleep. We had a lot of sentry posts. But there we were. And so another one says that what she had always dreamed of buying was for her to be able to buy her man a set of clothes. So we bought it. And later we called, aided by our colleagues that were promoters, we called all of the husbands for a get-together. We were having a big lunch in the mountain. We made it easy for everyone to get there. And then she lined up the cot. And she says, I bought this cot. Take it with you. The other one looks at her husband and says, look, I bought these dishes for the kitchen, this iron. Take them for me. And here's some money that I kept so you can buy me eggs from the other hand, because you told me that ours are brooding. You understand? So then we made a movement with action and reflection. So, and another would say, look, I bought you this wallet. But at the same time, the majority of what she bought was things that she had dreamed of for herself. And we continued. In this road that we took, we would make silos to teach what a silo was. It didn't really exist in Nicaragua. So we would make a ramp with leaves and everything, and we left it there because there was almost 32 children with us, because the women that had children would say, I'm interested in going. But I have a child, would say, bring him. So 2 would stay taking care of the children, and the others went to pick coffee. The next day, another woman stayed taking care of him, and others went to pick. But the brigade was playing an organizational role, teaching every day, and every squad would have a president, and we would have it would have the name of a cooperative. So then there were women there that said, shit, being president is hard. That woman lost the soap, and now I have to go find that soap? That's hard. It's hard, huh? But see, but that's how we must learn. So every day we would have a different executive board. The objective was to rotate and build unity. Yeah? Then we went together. We went to another finca, to another cooperative, and we went deeper into the mountain.
Martha, can I ask you to jump?
I only want to finish this little bit. Then I tell the compañeras that were in the city, get the media, because we're almost done. We had already been there since November. We were still up there in December, and we hadn't left the mountain. Get the media, and get the media, the local media come out with big headlines. The Maria Castil Blanco Women's Brigade refuses to leave the mountains until the National Farmers Union approves the line for women's work. So now we're doing what's called, just playing reality. So then, by now, the women that came from the different collectives, we all got in contact with Silvia Torres, a woman who is a researcher, and at that time she was a journalist with Barricada. Another one worked for the press, and we got them together, and they got these great headlines of the women cutting coffee, the women caring for the children, and us making our own food, other giving them other women shots because they were sick. But it was the movement. And immediately, the National Committee for the Sandinista Front immediately said that they're going to go see these women. And like 4 members come. At that time, when a president concedes, even the regional, the national organizations, we felt so big that there was no tree taller than us. And that's where they promised to have a budget line and a section for women. So we made it work passively, but with a lot of effort. And we did it. While at the same time, we wrote a book about everything we sang about. Forever, since I was an 8-year-old girl, I fitted into stones, sticks. Natural poetry always motivated me. Trees and stones with the earth. I can write a love poem. Let's see if you can explain that. That I would climb trees and stones, and I always liked poetry. I'm a poet, but very natural, right? Well, I am inspired by the earth, the water, and the trees. I really love them. I talk to them because I know that they have a surreal energy. Sometimes humans are more dangerous. So that's nature for me.
Nature for me is life.
It's life that has been destroyed so much. So we achieved this, and we went back. We left the mountain on January 8th, after having gone up on November 8th. We were mobilized from November to January. Not a single woman left. We fought, but with the support of the ATC, with the women from the ATC, the women from MLibrary, the women from the Women's Collective, the women's movements, and women from other countries, from Europe and other places. I lost contact with all of them because email didn't exist back then. It didn't, only telephones, right? So why did we lose contact with Elena, Esperanza, Rita? She was from Switzerland. Some were from the United States. On one of these occasions, Diana Deer also came. And Diana, with Diana, we've been friends since the 80s, and that's when she had her first visits. So then this beauty, we have very little contact now with the great women. Some of them, I don't know if they've died or if they're alive. They're going to have something to tell because they are women that in some way have fought and have helped. I never was able to pressure in order to achieve a goal. But the goal should be to progress flexibly and should continue developing itself. That's why there are times that I have some contradictions with some other organizations, because I don't think that because I set a goal and a plan, because there are $5,000, then we've already transformed women. No, that's a process that you enter. Sometimes women still advocate for the right, the fight for their own space as women, and sometimes those women are still abused. So it's necessary. I think that those women, I would say, that fought, because in Nicaragua and parts of Central America, women participated in national politics up until 53 or 1960. So that's a brutal step backwards that we've taken, and we are still fighting. I would say that those who fought in the 60s, and from the 60s to the 70s, it's just that every moment it was with a different style, a different methodology, or a vision.
What is the vision now?
What is the vision now? What strategies are you using now?
Well, first, to continue value the context. For some reason I think it's because we have intensified the different decades that we have crossed in life through this work. One is that, we have, at the beginning, initially the fight was to make a federation within the organization. You lost the nicest part, because this was the hardest part of life. When I expressed this, and another group of women, like Matilde and me, Morena Diaz, Berta Vargas, I don't want to forget anyone, but I forget. It was a small group, like Rosa Emilia Reyes, a small group of women, but not too small. Guillermina. It was about 20 women, and we had a section, and we began to fight. We asked the National Farmers Union why they had allowed the men to make a men's federation, but then why didn't they want our women's movement? We had almost 12,000 women. To make, they didn't want us to make an incorporated women's federation. They told us that this was divisive. So we said, we don't think we'll do them harm. We made them a proposal that UNAG become a confederation and that we become a federation. They said no. So then I, with all respect, which is so hard, but I was heading the entire movement because I was the only person who was a director. The rest of them were, they were responsible for the women's section that paid them. And I was the president and the vice president of the union. So then I started, the ups and downs. Look, here are the people who arrived just to manipulate. I was accused of being, that I was, what's it called? That I was sexually harassing one of the secretaries of the national organization. Right? That's the first thing they did. At that time, I swear, I didn't imagine that. I didn't feel it. And so when this woman says she's going to take on me, then I made a decision. This is why I say, I talk about wisdom and tact. And I tell her, look, it's none of this. I know that they gave you a nice car, they gave you $5,000, but I'm going to tell you something. Since I haven't done this, and I'm going to give a sworn declaration, I'm going to say it's true. She backed off. And she thought that this would humiliate me and that it was that I was going to, it was going to make me give up on my decision to have a women's movement or federation. You didn't get it, did you? I mean, so that I wouldn't have this adrenaline, this energy. They gave me this obstacle. They put this obstacle, a barrier. This woman saying that I was sexually harassing my colleague. Then this means that I wouldn't continue my work with the women, and I would step aside and leave it at that. But no, I decided to face this head on. I said, it's not true, but I'll play along. I'm going to say it's true. So in this way, I defeated this professional woman. So then we're all even, and we continued. We continued working.
And that's how you started this organization.
We continued working, and it was a tip that helps grassroots women, a tip that helps any woman to have tact. So then we get started, and they tell us, go ahead, create your federation. But they cut off all of our resources. They cut off all projects from our section. They cut off our vehicles. They cut off everything. And they left us. They left the women that supported us. They left them unemployed. Matilde, Morena, Berta, all of them. All of them end up unemployed. And they took our access to vehicles. They took everything away. So we ended up with nothing. So then I aim for something different. I aim to launch myself into politics. While the others continue to struggle, and I launch my candidacy, and I win at the national level. I win second place of all the deputies in this country. And I'm within the assembly. I win with a percentage of, it was 500,000 votes. A deputy didn't need that many. Deputy only needs 23. So I am a choice deputy. This makes me that my salary is then injected into this federation so that women can go with that and we negotiate. So then the people from UNAG want, they come. This is at, time for elections comes up, and people want to get rid of everyone. And Daniel Núñez tells me, Núñez is the name of the president, Álvaro Fiel, look, let's negotiate. If you guys give us the vote, if you vote for us, we will support the federation. Let's make a sworn declaration with a lawyer. And we made the sworn declaration with the lawyer. Yeah? So then, if you can see, this is a struggle, and we've achieved it. But now, look, we declare the federation, we get it started, but do you think the organizations give money to something that doesn't exist just because we say that we're a federation? So with the money that I made in the assembly, we rented a house, I bought a car, I bought an air conditioning unit, a computer, and I put it in. I'm saying it clearly because sometimes people don't know because we don't say it. And finally, a little help for the compañeras to be able to mobilize. That's where I invested all of it. I'm a deputy that left the assembly with the same shoes she entered the assembly with. But I was able to become deputy. But later I set out to become the director of the party, and I was able to get into the leadership of the assembly. I passed, but I passed quickly with my time as a deputy. I was a member of the Parlatino from the Senate, the Parlatino Senate. I was a deputy. And I was able to become part of the management. And the day that the Sandinista Front won here, I said, all right, you've got it. You've got more people than you need. I don't want to work here because I want to work with the campesinos. Can you imagine 9 years or 16 years working in the opposition? The day that you finally have the power and they get it and you say, no, I don't want anything, because I needed to understand policy and politics. Nobody can defend themselves if they don't understand policies. Nobody can defend themselves if they don't know how the economy works. But the bad thing is to be a political intriguer. But
I wish, as you say, I wish we had 4 hours to speak.
Disculpe, pero I wish, as you say, I wish we had 4 hours to speak. But I fear we only have merely 5 minutes left.
Well, I think that you have enough material for your examples.
I'd like to ask you another question.
What I do want to make clear is that when we are women with goals, women, we are more persistent. You know, we're able to give birth one day and go to work the next. We are able to have a child, care for him, and sometimes even make his food. You know, there's a reason why they say our brain is radiated, but we need to know how to make the best use of it. We are capable. And I think they say that men don't respect us. How is that? When you are taking power, you are respected. And that is important.
Can you tell me a little bit about
Can you tell me a little bit about your definition of feminism in your work?
Look, I think the processes, it's that there's a confusion here. Here, when people hear about feminism, they think, they either think, they think you're a lesbian, they think that you're, they say everything. Bisexual, that you're this, that you're that. I interpret feminism as my fight, as an ideology in defense of women, with the different expressions that everyone has decided to make their own.
Do you call yourself a feminist?
I do call myself a feminist because I'm fighting, and I think that it's part of my struggle, and it's part of the principle, and that each person, as they say, can play the ball the way they want.
I have one last question. You've talked a lot about situations in Nicaragua. In your opinion, are there any international policies or international economic policies that impact women in Nicaragua?
I think that to talk about gender politics, what has happened is that the focus that you used to have at a certain decade, the focus from one decade to another, what has changed is the language at the political, economic, and family level. But there is still so much underestimation of the role that we are capable of doing as women. I'm going to explain why. You can be a great professional, but you are always confused with something. Something will confuse you. There are men that don't even understand the theme, but they have an efficient secretary, but they're just morons. So then there's still a lot to fight for. There is a lot to fight for this real space for women's expression, both at the organizational level and at the personal level. Her decisions, and we still lack the application of so many laws that we have that aren't being applied in real life. And global policies are still bound to the media. Here, when they talk about women, they talk about the environment,
Here, when you talk about women,
of going to plant a tree. The programs are for vegetable gardening. You understand? They're not of much significance. We have to have programs of greater significance or scope, since women are the ones who drive the world economy. And you ask me why? Well, because the economy right now is driven by a corporation, by a bank corporation. But that's not how it is. The ones who create the products is all of us little people that when we come together, we become a corporation. Let's not kid ourselves. I don't think it's a rice corporation that plants rice. It's planted by many families, and then they get together, then it's a corporation. So then there are the roles, there's still roles to be played. There are many women that are secretaries or they're executives, but they aren't the directors of the universities, in the United States, for example, or in other countries. There's only a few of them. You need tweezers to find them, and you can ask Carmen Diana about it.
Can you tell me a little bit about the relationship between scholarship
Can you tell me a little bit about the relationship between scholarship like Carmen Diana's and the activist work you're doing?
Well, look, Carmen Diana has always had a focus on the women's struggle for land acquisition, for women to become empowered, and that is something that I really admire. She is a great woman. She's a woman that I think that with her profession, I think she's the only female director of a university in the United States, if I'm not mistaken. I think she's the only one. She came to share with us here in the countryside, in the departments. She has come to share her ideas with us, and we have shared ours with hers, because a professional also needs to get feedback from the product in order to be a good professional, and that's the informative part. And we also receive feedback from those concepts that they are focusing on out there in the world. So then we think that it's a great role, and to tell Carmen Diana, I hope 1,000 women come out with her same way of thinking. And there's also a lot of very smart women here, and I think the revolution really did give us that opportunity. It gave us some space that we need and we take advantage of, but not enough. Here, even though we had the revolution, hardly 13% of people obtained land. So we didn't accomplish everything. We have to keep fighting.
Martha, I wanted to thank you very much.
Martha, I wanted to thank you very much for your time and for sharing so much of your story with us today.
I wanted to tell you that I'm not perfect. I have made mistakes too. Just, when you walk, you make mistakes. If you don't work, you don't fail, right? Yeah, I mean, he who doesn't work will never make a mistake. He who works always finds problems and sometimes will make mistakes. But the good part is to never give up.
The good thing is to never.
And I think that my whole youth went by in this fight with a lot of hits and a lot of misses.
Many achievements and many.
So
I
then,
appreciate your sharing your struggle with us. We can learn.
I appreciate you sharing your struggle with us. We can learn from you.
I say that, we're telling it quickly because the reality is that it's a 40-year process. You've gone through tough and difficult battles that you can only win with great effort. And I hope that the coming generations follow us just like we followed other women who have struggled. I would read Domitila Luz, and I read about the women in the free trade zones from the United States, and I love documentaries. So every one of them is one of us, even if they're no longer living.
Muchísimas gracias, Martha.
Muchas gracias.
Thanks to all of you.